Hello and welcome to another Travel Risk Management Health, Safety and Security Advisory Tip. My name's Tony Ridley, Editor-in-Chief at travelriskmanagementsolutions.com. Foreseeable risk. Foreseeable risk is both a concept and a term referenced by the legal fraternity. And remembering that this is by no means in any shape or form legal advice, and for contextual information or accurate legal interpretation, please see a lawyer. Foreseeable risk as it relates to the identification of threats and hazards and risks is something that is both available to a group, to humans. What would be a reasonable expectation for people to identify that that was going to be a risk, and that is what is required by the law to demonstrate that you had a risk management system, process and determination in place before misadventure or catastrophic negative events that have taken place. So what this simply boils down to is your methodology. Now, the methodology can be lead or lag indicators. So what that means is that a lead indicator is something that you can telegraph in advance to say, well, you know what, these three circumstances here lead us to believe that this forecast is either repeatable, or it's going to be on a frequent basis, or it's likely to affect us. So let's say there's been a storm every month for the last 5 months, then you know what, it's likely that it's possible, I won't say likely, it's possible that the next month there will be another storm. Now, remembering that there could be seasonal changes and a whole bunch of other environmental aspects that could determine that, but there is a sequence and a pattern, which then leads you to a forecast, which is your lead indicators. Unfortunately, too many and the majority of indicators are lag indicators. What that means is historical data. So let's use it for something like terrorism. Terrorism can be a polarizing discussion point when we talk about travel risk and certainly international affairs. However, let's say that a particular location has not had a terrorist attack in the last 20 years. It may have issue-motivated groups, it may have capacity, it may have intent, but there hasn't actually been a terrorist attack in 20 years. That does not mean that there is or is not going to be one guaranteed with 100% assurity in the next 6 weeks, 6 months. There might be a number of mitigating processes, that the government agencies and the detection and prevention measures are extremely effective, but what if one of those fails and there is actually an attack? So it's not to say that this is relevant to just things like terrorist attacks, but it's the types of events that you could reasonably foresee. It's the types of things that there is empirical data for, or there is compelling reason to believe that there is a threat or hazard that would impact upon your individuals. So if it is a location where there has been terrorist activity, where there is terrorist events, where has been a history previously, and maybe not in recent times, it cannot be said that it's 100% guaranteed that it will not take place. Likewise, if we look at the phenomenon of tsunamis, tsunamis for many people up until 2004 was a word that was long forgotten, or some extraordinary terminology used occasionally. However, since 2004 to 2013, we've seen a significant increase on a regular basis, both the events and the impacts associating tsunamis in Japan, in American Samoa, PNG, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and so on. So there's been significant evidence that they do occur. The timeline that people were applying was simply disproportional. So over the last 1,000 years, there has been a sequence of natural disasters and events that has caused significant impact upon the civil populace, remembering that far more of it's concentrated around the coastlines and port cities and so on, which is also accelerated or expanded the impact. It's foreseeable, it's plausible, it's possible, all of those sorts of terminology, but we can't be running around thinking that the sky is falling and living under a bed or from a rock cave with a periscope looking at the rest of the world. There are decision-making processes that need to be considered, and from a risk management perspective, the identification of threats and hazards, the impact of scale, the velocity of onset, the footprint of disruption, all of those aspects as we qualify the risks need to be considered. But the basics from a court of law, I'm not a lawyer, this is not a legal opinion, but from a court of law being the jury of your peers, was it possible that that event was going to take place, or this negative outcome was foreseeable to the individual and the companies, and did you do anything about it? It's a pretty simple question. So in the event that you sent somebody off or they undertook travel to a location and there was a high increase of disease and they caught a disease that's now debilitated them, or there's an increase in motor vehicle accidents and it's almost a prolific event and they suffered from a motor vehicle accident that either incapacitated or killed them, it was foreseeable. Something extraordinary, once in a million, those sorts of things, then again, so long as you've demonstrated and can prove the system to identify foreseeable risk through advice, consultation, decision-making, monitoring, and all those sorts of basic metrics, then you have a defensible case. But to say that you didn't do anything, you didn't identify it, and you simply let the chips fall where they may, then you may also have the same philosophy for the outcome of your legal, civil and criminal prosecutions, because the chips may well not fall in your favour. Now, when it comes to foreseeable risk as well, one key element that individuals and organisations need to be very, very aware of is that in the event that you do identify that there is a threat or a hazard associated to your travel and you apply a $1 or $2 solution to that, it's as good as an admission of guilt. If you've been unable to proportionally provide support and resources to mitigate that risk, but you acknowledge that it was present, you simply took inefficient measures or inadequate measures to mitigate that, then that is tantamount to an admission of guilt in many instances, and you may find yourself either now or in the very near future facing significant exposure, risk, and possibly prosecution because you admitted there was a risk, you simply were too cheap, or yes, possibly too cheap, you were simply insufficient in your application of support and mitigation, which again, against the jury of your peers, may not bode you well in the event of facing prosecution or to defend your decisions and actions. So once again, thanks very much for joining us for another Travel Risk Management Health, Safety and Security Advisory tip. For more information and videos on this subject, please visit the website at www.travelriskmanagementsolutions.com. Thank you and goodbye.